but it's time to move on to Daniel Capper. So Daniel, take it away.
Let me unmute and let me get my technology going here. Okay, whoops. Went forward before we went, there we go. So thanks for tuning in to my presentation. I'm really happy to be here with you all. The first thing I want to do is plug what I'm about to say into Linda's outstanding presentation that just finished. First, Linda said that things like planetary parks are not enough in terms of planetary protection, and I utterly agree with her. She's absolutely right. But even though they may not be sufficient, I argue that they are necessary. And then we just got into a bit of a conversation about planetary protection versus the growth of the space economy. And I offer that what I'm talking about today tries to split the middle ground between those two ways of looking at space exploration. So throughout human history, a figure variously known as a man, rabbit, woman, or toad in the moon has played important roles in diverse cultures. Nonetheless, today that figure is under threat from the mining of our moon. Numerous national space programs, as well as private companies, desire to mine the lunar water ice that is proven to exist, rare metals, and especially the energy source helium-3. Helium-3, if fused with itself, in theory, produces clean electricity. Problematically, mining the moon for helium-3 will destroy 2 square kilometers of the lunar surface, 3 meters deep per year for a city the size of Dallas. So that providing helium-3 to many cities over numerous years potentially can disfigure the man in the moon, or what many Asians call the rabbit in the moon, as well as other ecologically valuable lunar features. Ameliorating these outcomes, this proposal suggests protecting important environmental lunar landmarks, such as the rabbit in the moon, the Grand Peak Mons Malapert, and the craters of Peary, Florey, Hertzsprung, and Von Karman, with multi-purpose reserves. Supporting these proposed reserves, 121 American Buddhists from the ethnographic field, when set in context with a control group of 78 non-Buddhist Americans, provide quantitative and qualitative moral voices in support of these reserves. In the end, we find in response to lunar mining scenarios, a clear argument for establishing multi-use nature reserves on our moon via international processes as soon as possible for ecological, cultural, scientific, and future recreational reasons. Diverse use reserves simultaneously will provide for the needs of science, environmental protection, future recreation, and sustainable industry, leaving areas outside of the reserves open for desired business. Initiated according to international best practices as delineated by United Nations environmental policies. These reserves even will preserve locations like the spot of the first human landing on our moon, a spot of immense historical and cultural value. In this way, we protect for generations to come what is most valuable on our moon, while also allowing lunar industry that follows ecological and ethical best practices. Thank you for your time. Now I'm open for questions.
Caleb, how about you?
So thanks for that. I really enjoyed watching your video. And my question is about, so like most of your argument seems to be focused around like the cultural and spiritual significance that certain features of the moon, for example, have to many people on Earth. And so a question is sort of a hypothetical, which is that imagine there was like this large cultural or spiritual movement that accorded a very significant intrinsic value, not only to certain parts of the moon or certain features of the moon, but to the sanctity of the moon as a whole itself. So that any amount of industry or mining or whatever would violate that kind of spiritual or cultural connection. In the case of your argument, how would you really deal with that? Would you say that, okay, we're justified in some extent in overriding this spiritual connection? Or are we not allowed to mine at all because of that?
No, it's not the case in my presentation that we're not allowed to mine at all. And your example it's hard to respond to because it's a hypothetical that doesn't exist. If there were a movement that said we must protect the entire moon for spiritual cultural reasons, I would argue that we have to listen to that movement, but that doesn't mean that we have to capitulate to the movement because it's all about cooperative dialogue here. Am I answering your question? I'm not sure if I'm getting at it properly.
Yeah. I guess I'm just wondering like how big, because at a certain point, like you have to make sort of a calculation and weigh these different the different harms. And I'm wondering like if you're going to do if you have to do that sort of calculus, then it's not really clear to me that the benefit that you get from respecting the spiritual or cultural norms can really outweigh the benefits of mining. It would be a more what I'm trying to hint at is that I guess it would be a more principled argument if you said that, okay, no matter what, we're going to respect these cultural traditions. But as soon as you concede and admit that at a certain point you'd have to override them, then you're doing a sort of weighting that even in the more moderate case, it seems would favor mining.
Oh, I see. Caleb, I don't see it as an either or the way that you're seeing it. To me, respecting spiritual visions doesn't mean that we have to capitulate to them. Again, establishing reserves on the moon will be a cooperative enterprise that requires bringing many different voices in dialogue together. So I can respect something spiritual, but still not argue that it should be protected. And on this note, I want to clarify something. You keep talking about cultural and spiritual aspects of my presentation, and that's fair enough. I am trying to highlight the cultural, but I'm also including environmental and scientific and future recreational reasons. It's not just the cultural reasons.
Thank you.
Okay, Robert. Okay, how about Abhik?
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. In fact, I have a question which is in context of both the papers, earlier one and also this one. I was wondering that whether it's time we should have a global kind of space protection act or something, with some teeth, because not only because see the space exploration or space exploitation was confined to 2 countries for a long time, but then now many countries are aspiring or having their space programs, and maybe in a couple of decades we'll have quite a large number of countries venturing into space and trying to exploit that. But also we must take into account those nations, those parties who may not be able to think of a space program for a considerable period of time. Small nations, maybe island nations, just like in climate change, as it is affecting the least polluting nation. So here also, if you think of the entire world community, then we should have a global protection act, which whether private corporates or government agencies or everybody has to respect, and there has to be some kind of consensus somewhere. Otherwise, maybe we'll again repeat the mistakes that we have made, say, in the colonies on Earth, and also destroy the stuff there to our own peril. So this
Right.
is a question I would like to pose.
Right. You're absolutely right, Abhi, that we need a global response to this because the stakes are global. I will highlight something that hasn't appeared in my remarks so far, the environmental justice issues here of who gets the resources for the moon, why are they entitled to them, and so on. And we need a global conversation if we're going to unravel those types of questions and come up with good resolutions here. So we definitely need a global response to the types of issues that I'm raising here. A problem here is getting the entire globe to agree on anything, especially when it comes to like a hard law treaty or something like that. And so for me personally, I want everyone to be involved in this, but it's probably, if these reserves get enacted, my sense is it'll be through soft law agreements where different companies just kind of countries just agree to act this way, and maybe not necessarily a hard law statute. I'll remind of what Dr. Kramer said yesterday. You got to start somewhere, and maybe the soft law approach is the way to start. But your concern with global issues is really, really well taken. There are some very deep environmental justice issues at play here.
Okay, Carlos?
Yes, more of a comment. Claudia Marcone is interested in preserving the dark side of the moon, which we all know isn't always dark, but there's strong interest in the astronomical community to keep that radio free for the purposes of SETI. And this would be a development in a sense, but we have to keep people away from it as opposed to allowing them into it. Have you thought about that, or have you in contact with these people, or?
I sure have thought about that. Without a doubt, the far side of the moon is a great place to put a radio telescope. And I offer you that in the Hertzsprung part of my proposal, as long as a radio telescope is operated sustainably, it can be placed right smack in that reserve, and it would have a first place location on the far side of the moon in terms of being right on the equator and protected from radio interference and so on. So actually, my proposal really helps. There are a number of proposals that to place telescopes on the far side of the moon or on the poles of the moon. And my proposal helps those telescopes. This is part of the scientific preservation reason that I was talking about before.
Okay.
All right, Linda?
Dan, thanks for a great talk. I wonder, I have not kept up with this lately, but this whole discussion about mining helium-3 on the moon, again, goes back to that problem I'm always seeing. Like, we cannot wean ourselves off non-renewable energy. And so we need to go elsewhere to deal with our energy needs. And who gets to do that? That whole idea, like he who gets there first gets the most, bothers me a lot. And it is in violation of one of the basic principles of the Outer Space Treaty. But I'm wondering if you are more up to date than I am about the status, our understanding of helium-3 resources and the expense and complexity of trying to mine it and then figuring out how to use it on Earth. I've just looked briefly at an abstract for the COSPAR meeting in 2014, and this is a study I'm not familiar with out of Delft University. And they did an analysis and said it's unaffordable. I mean, it's not possible to meet our future energy needs by 2040 by mining helium-3 on the moon. So I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, Linda, I'm actually quite curious to hear about your thoughts on that because you're better connected in the industry than I am. My understanding is that there are several companies that are not deterred by the arguments that it will be too expensive and that it will be economically prohibitive. Isn't this true, that Moon Express and other companies like that still want to get in on things?
Well, I haven't kept up with Moon Express, and Moon Express has been around for a long time. probably since I first entered the space community. At least Bob Richards has been around for a long time. So I'm just not sure if they have the finances and the technological capability. I know Jack Schmidt, the former Apollo astronaut, for years has been talking up the value of helium-3 on the moon. But as far as I know, he's been working with the same group of researchers at University of Wisconsin for probably at least 20, 25 years. So I'll look into that. I just don't know in terms of feasibility and affordability where things stand. I've seen a lot of these little companies come and go over the decades who say, we're going to do this great thing in outer space. And then 2 years later, they've evaporated. So, but Moon Express has stuck around. They've kept plugging along with small study grant money, things like that. So I'll look into it. Thank you.
Well, and that's fair enough. Your question is very good. I'll be looking into it too. We really need to come down with a better understanding of who's going to do what. But in the meantime, I hear lots of different answers to what could or couldn't happen. And I want to be prepared just in case someone's right that they could make money. Just in case someone does get there and start to mine, I want to be ready. So.
Okay, William.
Yes, Dan, I was following along with your suggested reserves to a certain point. I didn't quite understand the rabbit in the moon area, which is very large, of course. And I'm thinking about the negative space in an artistic sense, right, in a visual sense. I mean, I don't know what the regolith's going to look like after we strip mine around that. And how do you know that it's not just going to be the same color as the rabbit on the moon? I mean, don't you, in order to preserve an image, don't you need to preserve the space around the image as well?
That is an excellent comment, and I've definitely been thinking about that very issue. I think we would need to have some boundaries around the rabbit in the moon area or the man in the moon area for precisely this reason. The best way to respond to what you just said is to protect the entire near side of the moon. I'm not sure if such a proposal will ever make it through. I'm not sure that something like that will ever be approved. So I'm trying to avoid a proposal that preserves the entire near side of the moon. But for the reason you mentioned, in the ideal, that's how we would want to go. And I still think that we can maybe create boundaries around that figure so that no matter what happens with the regolith color, we still have that image.
Okay, Sabina.
Yeah, I have two questions to Linda and to Dan too. I have seen documents where the US offers contracts that are to be signed internationally, but only brings advantages for the US or gives the US most of the rights. And I think it's not fair. The question is, for me, the question is, to whom belongs space? And I think, and the other question was, what do you think about Robert Zubrin's response to the Planetary Protection Manifesto? I think that a broad international discussion needs to be held.
Okay, without a doubt, an international discussion needs to be held. And goodness gracious, you were just talking about my plan, kind of smuggling in US imperialism, and my plan is actually designed to kind of respond against that. My idea is that these reserves will be international zones that will not be owned by anyone. Now, we have some thorny space property rights issues to deal with for places that actually do get commercialized. But at least in these spots, they will be international spots and no one will own them, not the United States and not any other country. And in this way, you know, the OST talks about having outer space being the heritage for all humankind. And my idea with these reserves is that at least within the reserves, that will remain true.
Yeah, if only we can get there. And thanks for those questions, Sabine. The rhetoric coming out of the current US administration is, what's the word? Disingenuous, I think. where the NASA administrator has pushed out these Artemis Accords, which once again says the US is going to be the boss and anybody who wants to play with us can play with us, but we make the rules. And we've seen the two other major human spaceflight nations in the world, China and Russia, saying, no thanks, we can do this by ourselves. And in the current, talk about geopolitical environment, I think that's a mistake. And as Dan said, absolutely, the Outer Space Treaty establishes that outer space is the province of all humankind and should be preserved for the benefit of all humankind. And all we're talking about is countries that are rich enough to go out and get it. And Bridenstine's argument